Well, good morning again. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Danny. I'm not sure if I said that already. I'm one of our pastors here at our church, and excited that you're kicking this new year and new series off with us. I am really excited about this series. Being able to dive into the Enneagram is something that's really exciting. I will say I am not a professional at the Enneagram, and so I am not. I didn't write any books on this. Did not study this in college, but I'm going to be able to hopefully journey with you. And helping you mine out some of that information and find some of those answers and explore some of these conversations. Because really, that's the hope of this series. And the Enneagram is a personality typing system that helps us understand a little bit more about ourselves, both who we are at our baseline, but who we are in health and who we are in unhealth, and trying to help us understand not only how do we embrace the people that God created us to be and believe wholeheartedly that that was an intentional, wonderful creation, but how do we allow others to embrace that and allow them to live into that truth of who they are and who God created them to be. And so this isn't about creating labels for people. One of my least favorite things about the Enneagram is people will find out what your type is, or a whole group will like learn the language and vernacular, and then they'll walk around and be like, man, you're acting like such a 2, or you're acting like such an 8, right? This is not for that. This isn't to like pigeonhole people. This isn't to shame people. This isn't to put overwhelming labels on people. It's to understand ourselves better. It's also not a parlor trick. Like in some ways, it's a way to like point out and say like, well, I can tell exactly who you are. And I even did this in the last service. I shouldn't have done this, but someone said something and I was like, are you a 6? And they said, yes. Don't do that. That's like probably not what you're supposed to do with it. You're not supposed to guess necessarily who people are. It's not supposed to be a trick like that. But it is supposed to help us have better awareness of who we are and who other people are. And ultimately, it's not something meant to be a weapon. And I bring that up, and you'll be like, of course it's not. But you know what else wasn't meant to be a weapon? The Bible. And many people use the Bible as a weapon, right? And so it's helpful to like point things out that are obviously not meant to be weapons, but can be used as that, and just to lay that as the baseline. And so when we're using this, it is a way to understand ourselves better. It's a way to understand other people better. It is not a weapon. It's not a tool to be a parlor trick, but it's a tool to understand ourselves and others better. And really through the rubric and lens of like, we are people that were wonderfully created in the image of God. And so I want to share a quick story because Sadie and JT are in the Enneagram, and they fall into the Triad that we're going to be in. Actually, I'll show you this really. This is the Enneagram if you haven't seen it. So these are all of the 9 types, and so it's divided into 3 different triads: the body, the heart, and the head. We're going to be looking at the head triad today. So that's our 7s, our 6s, and our 5s. We're going to be exploring those today. But I wanted to share a little story that involved Sadie, who is a 7, and JT, who is a 6, and myself, who's an 8, so I'm not in this triad. And then I have an imaginary person, if they worked on staff, that would be a 5, how they would have responded. And so if you know, we did Christmas Eve last time that we gathered together, and we had 4 services. The first one being down at Lafayette Square, United Methodist Church in Lafayette Square, and it was a great service. It was wonderful. We had a lot of people there that had never attended the well before, people that were city people. It was a really cool service. But I'll say that everything went wrong that could go wrong. And before the service started, about 30 minutes before service started, all of our audio visuals went out. And like we couldn't figure out what the issue was. We didn't know how to fix it. And Sadie, JT, and I were all maybe had different lenses of how best to fix it, and we were looking at it in that way. And so I texted JT and Sadie, we have a group chat, and I said, hey, do you guys mind if I share this story? And I would love to know your input of how you guys engaged with this story. Like, how did you perceive what happened? And this was the text thread. I think I have it. This is the text thread that I have. It's pretty small. But Sadie said, me looking up flights. She's like, I'm getting out of here. I don't want to be here. JT said, me looking for flights to jump out of. Like, he was like, I don't want to be a part of this conversation. And if there was a 5 on our staff, they would have said, me, I've already bought a flight a week ago, and I traveled. Like, I'm out of here. Like, I planned for this day to come. And I'm just like, guys, like, let's just have some fun. Let's have this conversation. But they did share a little bit of their thoughts more seriously. And so, again, everything goes out. Our audio visuals aren't working. We're not sure if it's a connection thing or a software thing. And all we know is there's 30 minutes till service starts, right? And so, like, what are we going to do? And so I asked them to send me a message of kind of where they were and what was going on. So Sadie in Enneagram 7, she sent me this. She said, I said, so what did you process? She said, well, I already accepted that things weren't going to work. Like, I just accepted it. We're either going to have slides or we won't. I wasn't really fazed. And so Sadie was like, she saw it as an opportunity, and there was a reality in front of her, but she wasn't really fazed by the reality, but it struck me at the end. She said, I mostly just felt bad for how stressed that I was. She's like, I just mostly felt bad for how stressed that Danny was because I was a bundle of stress and I was freaked out. So it didn't go well for me on that day. But when we look at Enneagram 7s, oftentimes something that people might assume about them, and you can read this message, like I had already accepted it, it's either going to work or not going to work. Someone might say that they're avoidant, like that they're trying to avoid things, they've moved on, they're looking for the next experience, the next thing, like they've just accepted or whatever. That is not really what is happening here. Like 7s, especially in this moment, and Sadie in this moment in general, are not necessarily avoidant. They're grounded in hope and optimism, and they're ultimately like compassionate. Like you hear hope, optimism for the situation, but also compassion for me in this situation. Like she senses at a level what I am going through. And that the good that is often missed in 7s, and I want to share this for all of them because I think we can sometimes miss the good in people, but the good in 7s that can often be missed, that 7s carry joy on purpose. They carry joy on purpose for themselves. They carry joy on purpose for other people. They are carrying joy very purposefully. That's not like being flippant. That's not trying to be nonchalant. They're carrying something on purpose, and they carry it to protect the spaces that they care about. Like for them, joy is something that is a protective measure, something that helps them feel loved, but also helps them love other people well. And so that was our Enneagram 7 in this situation. JT is a 6. I have a lot of 6s around me. My wife, JT, and last service I said, raise your hand if you're a 6, and like 95% of the service raised their hand. But here was JT's response. He said, my first response was, we can fix this. That's very JT, right? If you know JT, he's like, we're going to fix this problem. We can fix this. He said, I checked everything, but then when we couldn't, this is also very JT, I immediately started catastrophizing and blaming myself for everything that I had not planned for this exact scenario. And so you hear like the heart of what JT is saying. Like first response, he's trying to stabilize things. Like he's trying to make things not fall off the rails because he cares about things. And then he feels the weight of responsibility around him and maybe starting to feel that on himself in ways that were unfair. Like this was certainly not JT's fault, but he immediately went to a place of asking like, what did I do to get this here? And then you hear not necessarily fear, but you hear a level of devotion in his story. Like he is devoted to caring about what's going on. I would say that 6s are often are seen as fearful, but 6s are really not fearful, though this is a triad that often has a little bit of fear in it. They're not necessarily fearful. They're loyal guardians of other people's love, and they carry that heavily. It weighs on them because they care so much about caring for other people, creating stability, both for themselves, but also for other people. And the way that they show stability and show care and show love is by being planned out people and creating that for those around them. And then if we jumped to this 5, we don't have a 5 on staff, but if we did have a 5, they might have said something like this, that their instinct would be to step back and think before jumping in. That's something that 5s often do. They are analytical, they think, they try to imagine what is going to happen, but they wouldn't do that because they don't care, but because and not because they didn't want to make things worse, but they're trying to not burn out before everything else gets going. Like we had a whole day ahead of us, and so a 5 in that situation would be like, there's a problem, and it certainly needs to be fixed, but if I dive in now and put all of myself into this, will I have anything left to give for the rest of the day? And 5s are often seen as distant. 5s are not distant. They protect the spaces that they have with the presence that they have so they don't disappear when things matter most. They want to be able to show up not just in every moment, but in the really important moments. And they try to be there for people, but they really want to be able to be there when it matters most for people. And this is not about the Enneagram 8 this week, but I'm an Enneagram 8. And so I'll just tell you what I did in this situation is I was like, all right, there's a problem and the slides aren't working. So I decided that I was going to take every slide out one by one and recreate it. And I got done at 9:59 before service started at 10. And I was like, guys, I've done it. I'm the superhero. I've solved the problem. And then everything went wrong. Like I created a solution with more problems. Like, and that is often what 8s can do. They like bulldoze the situation. Like, we're going to find the solution at all costs. And what I did in this situation was I just created new problems. Like, I didn't actually solve the issue that was at hand. And I think that's important for us to look at in this is like every person, like I saw myself as healthiest as I could have been in this situation, being like, I'm going to solve the problem by brute force because that's what I do. I'm a solutions person. I'm action oriented. And really what I did was I created more problems. Right? And so when we look at these, understanding who we are at our greatest level of health, but also our greatest level of unhealth is helpful. And not to be like shameful. I remember when I studied the Strength Finders, if you're into Strength Finders assessment, I really liked that one. What I didn't like about it is that it only talked about my top 5 strengths were. Like, I really wanted to know the areas I was deficient at, not because I wanted to like rework what my strengths were, but because I wanted to know what some of my blind spots were and some of the shadow sides of things. And I think what makes the Enneagram really helpful for us is it gives us helpful language and a rubric for who we are at our healthiest, but it also gives us what oftentimes the world doesn't want to look at is maybe who we are at not our best, so that we can try to mitigate those and navigate those and not do those things, but have awareness of when we're going into unhealth versus health, if that makes sense. And so what we kind of saw in this situation with Sadie, JT, myself, and this imaginary staff person is like 7s care through joy, I would say, is something that we see. So it's 6s care through responsibility, and 5s care through steadiness. All of those are different roads and different paths. All of them are caring for the people around them, for the situations and the ecosystems, the people, the circumstances. And sometimes when we don't see things the way that we would do them, we don't perceive them as that. But these are all different roads to the same path of caring for the people and the places and the systems that we love. And that's really why this series matters and why we're doing this. It's not to judge people, but to help us be our best selves and allow other people to do that as well. For us to be the people God created us to be, that's like one of the biggest tasks, and that's not an individualist thing, but we want to be able to be the people God created us to be. But the challenge in that is, like, as we are able to do that at our highest level, we either intentionally or unintentionally allow others by permission giving to do the same thing. That's really the ultimate hope of this series. And so whether you're a 6, a 5, or 7 in this triad or one of the other ones, use this as a way to learn about yourself more, but you might have someone in this triad in your life. This is a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about them, even if this doesn't speak specifically to you. And so I wanted to ask a question and take some time to like have a little bit of discussion in your pockets. And so if you're with someone you know, that's great. If you don't know the people around you, just quickly introduce yourself. But I want you to unpack this question really quick. When your brain won't shut off, what does it do? And you might think about this in terms of like the best example. You're laying in bed at night. It's not because you've had too much caffeine. You're just laying there and your brain won't shut off. What is your brain doing in that moment? And if you know your Enneagram type, maybe share that with the people around you, because if you're a 5, a 6, or a 7, that would be helpful. If you don't know it, that's totally fine. But answer this question. We'll take about 2 minutes, so a little bit of a longer chunk. Turn to the people around you, introduce yourself if you don't know them, and answer this question. We'll come back together in just a moment. So the question at hand was, when your brain won't shut off, what does it do? And a couple weeks ago, we had a whiteboard, and I tried to keep up writing all these down, so I'm just not going to do that today. But I would be interested to hear some of this. Would anyone be interested to like throw yours out? Like, what are some of the things? Yeah.
Thinking what could happen, how could I keep that from happening, and then go on to the next thing. Well, this could happen. How do I keep that from happening? I'm training myself not to do that and to be able to turn it off, but that's where my mind actually goes.
Yeah. So you like go into like contingency plans and like
Exactly.
the forks in the road of if this, then that, and that, then this. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah. So kind of like imagining, attaching, or detaching, going through that. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. List making. Of like, so someone said this last, and we're not having a personal conversation, but I'm asking you a follow-up really question. Is that like list making for things that like will happen, or like eventualities, or like things that are like never gonna happen? Okay. To-dos. Okay. So things that needed to be accomplished that maybe didn't get accomplished that day and then need to go the next day. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Does anyone else resonate with that? Okay. Yeah. So so you're running through all of those things. How does that go? Is that enjoyable or not enjoyable? Like seriously, is that something that like gives you life, or is that hard? Yeah. So that's like a way to like stabilize. Like you're not trying to catastrophize. You're like stabilizing. Yeah, that's helpful. Cool. Anyone else? Yeah. Interesting. Uh, Not to follow up and put you on the spot here, but why do you think that is? Like, what about the day and the night? Like, what do you imagine that comes from? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. A few more. Okay. Yeah. I dig that. Because of like what you did in him. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if you heard that. Sadie said she finds the best joke of the day that landed, and then she retells that. Uh, yeah. uh, maybe one more. Anyone else? I don't want to like cut anyone off, but yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I think like many like so whatever triad you're in, I think something that we probably saw because we had a different group of people likely represented, not all 7, 6s, or 5s, but we had a group of people represented here. Like one of the things is like all of our minds probably don't shut off at night, right? Like but we do different things, and I hopefully that was helpful for you. Like if you heard someone that's a 7 or an 8 or a 4 or a 2, like know this, like all of our minds don't really shut off at certain points, but the reality is we're doing things a little bit differently. Like, and that's something for the people in my life that they're in different triads than me is like I am aware and becoming more aware in my life that like we're going through the same things, but I use the analogy of the prism often. Like we're looking at the stuff through the prism very differently. Like we might be experiencing it radically different, even if we're going through the same thing. And for our friends that are in this triad, this head triad, often, and many of you said this, but they go through things like, as you heard, what ifs and worst case scenarios. They're planning. Sometimes they're planning like escape routes from situations, whether literal or relational, other things like that. Replaying conversations, we heard that one a lot. And for me, like I replay conversations a lot, and as an 8, and I'm like I replay them as like highlight reels for how much I crushed it during that day. And many of you, like maybe replay those conversations, and you're like, man, that didn't go well, right? And so just realize we're all replaying things, but we may view them differently in how we go about them. Sometimes imagining solutions, scanning for risks, and sometimes researching like everything. Like I'll roll over at night. My wife is a 6. And she'll be on her phone, and she'll be like, she's been like for hours researching this thing that I didn't even know we needed to care about. But it was like on the tip of her mind. And like, I think that is something that's like important to know because it's like something that is not flippant for her, but something that she has been laboring over that has worked its way to the top to that she had to research it. For me, it feels like this off the cuff thing, but for her, it was like a part of weeks and weeks of thinking and researching and planning that led to this moment. And here's what I would say to all of this. Like none of this, and hopefully you didn't hear it this way, but if you're in this triad, 5, 6, or 7, hopefully you understand that none of these things mean that you're messed up or wrong or broken. Like none of them mean that. But these are all the ways that you are wired and help you ask the question and arrive at like, how do I love the people around me the best I can? And 5s often do that. They feel safe through understanding. 6s feel safe through preparing. 7s feel safe from staying ahead of things. And in each one of these things, the head triad doesn't worry about things because they don't trust. They certainly worry about things, and I don't know about more or less than most, but it's one of the ways that this triad is often characterized. But they don't worry because they don't trust. They worry because they care deeply about both God, their friends, their family, their relationships, sometimes at the expense of themselves. I would say that would be my not critique in a bad way, but when I look at people in this and you read about them, like oftentimes these people care so much about themselves, 5, 6, and 7, that they are the last people to get fed, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, because they're planning for other people, or they are trying to understand other people, or they're trying to stay ahead of other people. And they're doing this not to disassociate or to remove themselves or to be detached, but because they deeply, deeply care about people. And so what I wanted to do is, like, this isn't just like a dive into the Enneagram. We really want to see, like, Scripture as it connects to this as well. And so if you have your Bibles, you could open them up to Philippians. We're going to be in chapter 4, verses 6 through 7. Short passage, maybe one you're familiar with. And one that is often used to, like, shame planners and people that are anxious and people that are thoughtful, people that fall in this triad. And so we picked this passage intentionally because it's often, like, thrown in their faces as a negative. And so I want you to hear this passage. Again, if you want to open up your Bibles, Philippians 4, 6, or 7, but it'll be on the screen as well. It says, don't be anxious about anything. That's an aggressive opening for anyone that's anxious, right? You're like, I mean, I'm already feeling bad, right? But don't be anxious about anything, but rather bring up all your requests to God in prayer and petitions, along with giving thanks. Then the peace that God offers that exceeds all understanding will keep your hearts and your minds safe in Christ Jesus. So again, this is often a passage that can be thrown at our 5s, our 6, our 7s, our head triad is like, hey, you're just, like, being a little anxious. Like, you're being kind of uptight. Like, just let go and let God, brother. Like, that's not what's happening here in this passage. Like, Paul is not saying to the audience here in Philippi, he's not saying stop worrying. He is not saying calm down. He's not saying just trust God more. Like, those are not any of the things that Paul is really trying to get across here. But he isn't even really trying to rebuke people that are anxious. He's trying to be a friend. He's trying to be a pastor. He's trying to be a support. And in these words that are often twisted as more of a critique, really what he's trying to offer here is support and grounding or prayer. He's like, let's, like, find ourselves like something stable. And prayer is often seen as like a way we tell God what we want. But what Paul is saying here, both in terms of prayer with people and prayer with God, like, this is a chance to articulate and to share and to ground ourselves with God and with other people and name the things that are the most heavy on our heart. And I can only talk to the people that I know, but I'll use JT and my wife Annie as an example as 6s. Like, sometimes the greatest way for them to release some of the anxiety that's in their lives is by verbally processing it. And my wife is a big verbal processor, and I love that. I'm a verbal processor as well, but sometimes it can be seen as, like, being overly anxious or maybe complaining. Like, it is not, that is, like, the pathway to grounding, right? And that's something that Paul is trying to say here to the audience of the listen. Like, if you guys can ground yourself in this with prayers with God and with other people, it'll help you stay rooted. He's also saying be honest. And that's one of my favorite things about this. Like, nowhere in here is Paul saying pretend like there's nothing to be anxious about or pretend like everything is going well. Like, he does say name the joys and name the concerns, but be honest about them. And oftentimes I think our 5s, our 6s, and our 7s, because they get a bad rap for coming across anxious, they feel like, well, then I just won't name any of those things. And for any of you in the room that are a 7, a 6, or a 5, like that's not healthy, right? To just bottle that up and keep that inside of yourself. And for any of us that are in any of the other triads, like, when you engage with those people, like, you know that's not a healthy way to engage with them, to say keep this to yourself, right? And so he's trying to say, like, ground yourself, be honest, but he also says have thanksgiving, which is kind of reorientation language. He's like, maybe look at it through a different perspective of the prism, right? And that's something that is sometimes hard for those in the head triad to do because they think so thoughtfully and so deeply. But to be able to reorient and look from a different perspective sometimes gives a lens that maybe we didn't have up to that point. And then Paul says, like, this will provide you peace that surpasses understanding, that guards you and protects you, is what some of the other translations say. And this peace that guards and protects you is one that is not rooted in pretending and not rooted in imagining things aren't the way they are, not even being anxious, but being grounded and honest and connected to God and to other people in that. And a part of, like, knowing ourselves really well is being honest with ourselves. And part of knowing ourselves really well is being able to share ourselves with other people, both with God and with one another. And this is a little bit of what Paul is getting at, is trying to encourage people to be honest. And he's not telling people to erase who they are, but he is trying to remind people, and this would be specifically to my people in the head triad, the 6s, 7s, and 5s, is you don't have to carry things alone. Like that's a little bit of what Paul is trying to get at. And some of the people in this triad can feel as if that they are the only person that cares enough to carry these things. And I think Paul is trying to remind, like, you don't have to carry any of these things alone and that God is standing with you. But Paul is also reminding me, like, I am standing with you. Like sometimes we forget like what Paul is doing. He is writing real letters. These are not books of the Bible as we read them now. These are letters to real people that he likely knew or wanted to get to know if he didn't know them personally. So he's offering not just God's support, but he's like, I want to be your friend and I want to be your ally. And this entire church in Philippi that he's writing to, he's like, I want them to be your allies as well. Like you don't have to carry this alone. And not only is God standing with you, but Paul himself is offering himself as someone to stand with them. But again, I think that we can look at some of these personality types, right? And we can misunderstand them, right? And again, my wife and I are different. I'm an 8, so I'm in the gut or the body type, and my wife is a 6, she's in the head. And so we perceive and respond and process things differently. And I asked my wife's permission before I shared this, but there are 2 things that she does before we go to bed at night that like drive me bananas. Because I'm like laying down. I'm like, let's go to bed. And then I'll roll over, and then she'll ask me, she's like, hey, what did you buy for like $3.80 at the BP today? And I don't know if anyone uses Rocket Money. We like manage our money with Rocket Money, so it like tracks our subscriptions and our things. I receive this as like a personal attack on me as a person. I'm like, I just want to get a Snickers and not get shaken down. You know what I'm saying? And my wife is in this situation, and she's like, I just want to make sure that we have such a grasp on our finances, but also everything, that we have planned through everything, that she wants to know the geography of our life so well that we never take a step forward in uncertainty, right? And so I perceive this as like a lack of trust, and my wife perceives it as a way to not only cultivate trust, but cultivate like a thriving life together, right? And for people in our lives, regardless of what type you are, like we can sometimes look at these things that come across, and this one is like an annoyance, and it's like a really thoughtful and heartfelt way that my wife is trying the best to love me and my kids and our relationship and cultivate something. And when I'm in my least healthy, I think it's something that's attacking me, but when I'm my most healthy, like I enter into that space to collaborate with her, and so that we can cultivate this together. The other thing that she does is I have probably like 50 unread Instagram messages from my wife, and they're all the same reels of this like finance bro that she sends me. And Andrew Vinalsdal is our church treasurer. He's a CPA, he works for MasterCard, and I blame him for sending these to my wife first. And Andrew's husband, Michael, was in the first service. He's like, now you know what I'm going through. But he sends these things to my wife, and they're like the 5 best SUVs to buy on a budget, or like the 5 best side hustles. And so my wife has been planning like a vending machine side hustle so we can retire soon. I'm like, I don't even know what's happening anymore in my life. And I perceive these as like silly things that are not going to add any value to our life. And my wife is like, these are the little details that you care at all about. That if we just cared about these details and planned about these things and looked at these eventualities and these paths, then we would, again, be so prepared that we could tackle anything that life throws at us, right? And in this circumstance, I can view it as something that is a bother or silly or like not actually tangible to our life. But my wife, I'm often seen as the dreamer in our relationship, the person that's like thinking of opportunities and plans. Like this is the way my wife knows how to dream and plan, is by thinking through the things that we might be able to do. And it's not as like sexy as like dreaming about where you're going to be in 5 years, but it's equally as important. And when we're as healthy as we can be together, like we both collaborate in this process together. Again, I don't share this to like say that my wife is one way or I'm one way, or one's right or the other, but it's a way to add like flesh and bones to something. And in this instance, like 6s, my wife in this, like she's not panicking. Like I would view both of these as panicking when I'm not healthy. Like my Snickers purchase is not something we should be tracking. And then planning these side hustles seems like panic that we don't need to do. These are not panicking. These are protecting the things that she cares about the most through planning and preparation. And for those of you that fall into this triad, I think it's helpful for us to understand that 6s, 7s, and 5s love deeply, and sometimes that manifests itself as a responsibility that no one else in the room senses or feels necessary to carry. Like this group is ultimately loving through responsibility. And sometimes that's responsibility to bring the fun. Sometimes that's responsibility to plan. Sometimes that's responsibility through thinking through eventualities or whatever, but ultimately they're trying to protect and to care and to share some responsibility. And so what I wanted to do was say like something that might be like this, so what? So like if you're a 5, a 6, or a 7, like what do you do with this? And for those of you that aren't in the room, like what might we do to love them well? And so this is for our 5s first. I have a little mantra about some things, but I would first say choose presence over withdrawal would be the first thing that I would challenge you to do, to show up, to share wisdom before it's perfect. 5s often feel like they have to get everything perfect before they can share it with the world. Know that like your best isn't always the perfect thing that you have to share. Like your presence can be something beautiful to share with us, and to show up and to just let yourself be seen. I think sometimes 5's greatest fear is that if they bring something that's not perfect, then they'll lose their seat at the table. I actually think this whole triad, when we talk about your seat at the table can't cost someone else theirs, 5s, 6s, and 7s are the ones that are the most fearful of losing their seat at the table often, because it feels like it's connected to this. But your mantra might be this, that I am safe and I am seen. I'm not depleted or overshadowed. And when I say not depleted or overshadowed, I mean you don't have to like give everything of yourself so you have nothing left for others or yourself. So you don't have to be depleted, and you don't have to be overshadowed by those that act faster or move quicker or have all the words. Like you are seen and you are safe and you are known. You are a part of this beloved community. For our 6s, I would say choose trust over catastrophe, maybe would be a way to say it. Ask what else might be true. Borrow courage from those around you, realizing that the community can carry weight with you. Often 6s feel like they're the only ones responsible enough to care about any of the things that no one else in the world cares about. And I think that maybe is true in some ways. But also I think understand that you are not alone in this. And as Paul reminds us, not only is God with you, but there's a community around you. And I think the mantra you might have is to say that I am held and I am not alone. And the other side of that would be like, I'm not the holder and I'm not isolated. Like you do not have to be the only one to hold this. Oftentimes 6s feel if no one holds it, it'll never be held. Or if I don't hold it, no one will hold it. If I don't do it, no one will do it. And challenging yourself to believe a mantra that you are held by God before you hold anything yourself, and that you're not alone, and that you're not ultimately the only holder, and you are not isolated. There's a community of people that want to help carry that burden with you. And for our 7s, I would say the challenge might be to choose stillness over escape, to stay in hard moments. Let joy run deep, but not always fast, and be someone that dives deep into relationships, not always the next thing. And believe that God meets you in the pain and the hardship, not just in the joy and the adventure and the beauty. And the challenge and the mantra might be that I am loved even when I stay. And so it's not only about chasing, it's not only about finding somewhere else. Certainly those are places that God is, but it doesn't only happen over there. And it doesn't only happen when we chase, but it happens here and now, that you are loved even when you stay in a situation. And so for our not head types, for our not 5, 6s, and 7s, here would be the things that I would challenge you. Don't say any of these things to a 5, a 6, or a 7. Don't say relax. Just don't. Don't say stop overthinking. Don't say just have faith. And don't say you're too much, which I don't know who I would say that to ever, but don't say that. Like these, just take those out of your lexicon in general. But I would challenge you, if you're ever talking to a 6 and you know them, like if you could think of one thing to say last, relax and stop overthinking might be the worst 2 things to say to them, right? Because that's something that they already fear you think about them. And so take those things out of your lexicon. But things that you might challenge yourself to do would be this. Embrace curiosity. Say this, like, tell me what's happening inside your mind. That was a huge switch for my wife and I, is I often would like hear her talking and I just assumed what she was thinking. And I assumed what was going on. Like I had to learn to ask, like, what's going on in your mind? Like, what are you thinking? Like, what got you here? And not trying to like make assumptions and get myself there on my own, but say like, what are you really thinking about? What's happening in your mind? I think validating, saying that makes sense is great. Oftentimes, if people share things with me, my response would be like, that makes no sense, and let me tell you why you're wrong. Like, even if you don't think it makes sense, just start with this makes sense, right? Like sit in that for a second and really try to see their perspective. So giving validation is really, really important. I think having presence, making sure that they know they are not carrying it alone. I think for JT and for Sadie in this Christmas Eve example, like that was all 3 of our biggest fears. And for a 5 in this situation is like that if no one does this, I'm going to be the only one to do it. And I don't know that any of us responded as healthily as we could, But at our greatest, what we could have done is be like, how do we go about this as a triad, all three of us together rather than any one of us alone? And like realizing and encouraging, like, you are not alone in this. I think offering grounding and presence, saying I'm here with you in whatever this is. And then I think offering some sort of like blessing and community in that. And I think if we can do those things, take some of those negative things out of our lexicon, but also provide curiosity and validation and presence and blessing and connection in this, like, it helps those people in this triad get to know that they are loved, that they're held, they are seen, that they are wonderful, even if they're not perfectly curated, that they have a seat at the table, even if it's not the way that they imagined it to be. And so over this series, we're going to look at each different one of these. And so 6s, 7s, and 5s, you're not getting picked on this week. Next week, we're going to dive into a new triad. But my hope is, again, like wherever you are, if you see yourself in this one, that you might be able to take this journal home with you, and please take it, like process it and ask questions. If you're in a well group, have some of these questions. If you have a partner or a spouse or kids at home or just friends that you hang out with, like use this as some sort of like vernacular and common thread for conversations to be able to dive into this. And then each week as we come back, if your week is next or it's not, like use it as a way to see yourself better. And if it's not your week, use it as a way to figure out and ask the question, how do I love that neighbor better? Because ultimately that's what we're trying to do in this, is understand not only how do we love ourselves well, but how do we love others well? We get that commandment from Jesus, right? To love your neighbor as I love myself. Like we have to be able to love ourselves well so that we can love others well. And I think they're both hand in hand and connected in this. And my hope for us as we go through this journey that we might be able to do both well. So with that in mind, would you join me in a word of prayer? God, I do thank you that none of us are accidents. None of us are flippantly made. None of us are thrown together without intentionality, but each and every one of us is wonderfully and intentionally made and created in your image. And so, God, I just ask that you would help us see ourselves the way that you see us, as beautiful and wonderful creations in your image, with uniqueness and passions and gifts and deficiencies and all of the things that come with life, but ultimately at the core of that, people that are loved and known and seen and created in your image. And so, God, help us create love for ourselves, help us share that love with others, and help us see how much you love us in the process. Be with us now as we continue to worship. We pray this all in Jesus' name.